I told you.
It's naval blockade yesterday at 10 a.m.
Let's get to it. Chinese tanker reportedly passes U.S. Hormuz blockade. It's a Chinese flag ship. Let's hear where the double blockade is at now.
Eastern, we're around 17 hours in. And basically, a lot of the traffic, the little trickle we've seen since the start of the war has come to a screeching halt, apart from one incident. And this is really interesting because this is a Chinese-owned vessel. It's now said to have tested the U.S. naval blockade because it has passed through the Strait of Hormuz. Let's take you through this. This is a Rich Starry. This is a tanker said to be carrying methanol. It started moving from Sharjah here in the UAE. Remember, a lot of these vessels turn off the AIS transponder, so you don't really know the origin of which port that they moved from. Starting to move towards Keshem and Larak Islands, then, starts a boating mission, moves back, and then starts to take that route once again, passing through the strait in the early hours of this morning. Now, this is a tanker that has been sanctioned since March 2023 by the U.S. Treasury Department because it has links to Iran. Now, from what we understand from experts, this tanker was able to move through completely unfazed by the U.S. naval blockade. So we don't know what exactly transpired and how the United States is enforcing this blockade. But this is really interesting to see this tanker that has, links to Iran, that has been sanctioned by the United States, being able to move through the Strait of Hormuz at this time. A lot of the shippers are very reticent to even make the voyage. Number one, they're worried about having to coordinate directly with the Iranians. And then number two, what will they face when they hit the U.S. naval blockade? A lot of the shippers believe that this is a double dilemma in terms of negotiating with both sides. From what we know right now, that the United States is doing this naval blockade to perhaps start negotiations to force Iran to the negotiating table. You'll remember that a lot of the revenues that Iran is getting right now at the start of this war had to do with the toll that they were charging the shippers, Rosemary, and then importantly, the Iranian oil that was being sold. And if you look at some of the tanker traffic since the start of the war, it has been dominated by Iranian-linked vessels and also vessels that are friendly to Iran. So the United States and President Trump has been very clear about this, that any vessels, any shippers that have paid that toll fee could face indictment. And you have an interesting bar chart here showing just how much the traffic plummeted since the start of the war. And you've seen a trickle throughout the over 40 days that we've been facing this conflict. In total, 453 vessels have transited the strait since February 28th. And importantly, just to give you a bit of a perspective, normally 130 vessels pass through the strait on a daily basis. Richard Mead is the editor-in-chief of Lloyd's List Intelligence, and he's with us now live from London. Richard, good to see you. You and I have been talking consistently since the start of the war, and there's been, really interesting developments, specifically over the past few hours. After the U.S. naval blockade came into effect, we saw one Chinese-linked tanker that was sanctioned by the United States since 2023 transiting through the strait after initially had, backed out and then moved through once again. What do we know about the Rich Starry and whether it was challenged by the U.S. Navy?
Well, at the moment, we know very little. It's still moving.
Go, Rich Starry, go. Gore, Rich Starry, gore. Do it for the world, Rich Starry. CENTCOM denies that any ship made it past the blockade. Of course they did.
Suggests that it hasn't been challenged by the US. To be clear, we're not entirely sure that this was laden with Iranian crude. It's been used as floating storage for a while. It entered back into the Gulf about 10 to 12 days ago from memory. And then it was heading out of the Gulf this weekend and did a bit of a U-turn at the point that Donald Trump announced the blockade. It then made a break for it last night and has exited. Now, this is, as you say, a sanctioned, falsely flagged ship. It is nominally fraudulently flagged to Malawi, but we know it's a fraud. This probably would be a target, but it seems to have got out. We've also got a number of other shadow fleet tankers, one of which is sanctioned, heading in. So it's going to be interesting to see how the US responds to this. But right now, the vast majority of shipping is not moving on either side.
Yeah, so give me a sense of what shippers are telling you. There's a lot of confusion about who to negotiate with. On the Iranian side, I mean, it's been very clear, coordinate directly with Iranian forces. Now you've got the US naval blockade. Is there any appetite to move through the Straits, even if...
I mean, I think what America's trying to do is force the hand of desperate shipping companies to not go through the toll process and avoid the Iranian Navy and go directly through the American blockade. Because, like, what they've said they're doing is, like, if you touch an Iranian port, which as it stands, all ships that transit through the Strait of Hormuz can only go through the strait if they stop at an Iranian port, at which point they will pay a toll and then move through the Iranian port and safe officially. Like, if you look at the way that oil transits, it's very slow, okay? It takes a long time for these massive tankers that oftentimes have 2 million barrels of oil in them to go through a full transit, right? They load up and they take the oil to refineries around the world. America, because of its distance from the Gulf, America still receives oil from the Strait of Hormuz. By the way, a lot of people don't know that. But because of its distance, America is the last to receive the oil shipments, right? Which means there's a delayed impact for American oil. Ever since the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, I believe this week was the timeline for many of the Asian markets. Like, I think it was yesterday or today, it will be the last time Asian countries will receive oil from the Strait of Hormuz, because all the tankers that left before the closure are finally arriving at their ports. Some are arriving tomorrow. Some have arrived yesterday. For the United States of America, I believe it will be this week at some point, where the last oil tankers that left before the oil blockade took place will finally arrive at American refineries. On top of that, there is a shadow fleet, and there's also spot trading as well. Because this is a very expensive commodity, obviously there are a bunch of other tankers that either don't have their transponders on or are sanctioned. So they can also offer a little bit of price stability. Nations that were previously sanctioned, like Russia, will be able to offer additional supply to countries that previously were not allowed to get oil from Russia. Will be able to get oil from Russia. On top of that, there are spot traders, right? Like, there are people that have a lot. Like, there are people that have oil tankers out and about that can take advantage of the new market prices and sell at a higher price point. So there are some forces that can stabilize the market a little bit, right? However, that's finite. At the end of the day, if you cut off 20% of the entire globe's oil supply, it's eventually going to lead to price shocks, okay? It's that simple. And because of the length of travel for oil, we haven't actually received the price shocks just yet, because they're trying to play around and take advantage of the lag. They're trying to play around to the best of their ability to withstand the imminent collapse of global energy markets. But there is a finite amount of oil. So if you run out of it, you're going to run into problems. Here's a video someone sent that says it explains it very well. Let's take a look.
4 soccer fields long, it carries 2 or 3 million barrels of oil, and it weighs more than a skyscraper, all of which makes it slow, 10 or 15 knots. That is, no joke, the speed of a bicycle. Our global energy supply lines move at the speed of a Schwinn. And let me show you on this globe why that's important. If you biked all day, how much of this globe do you think you could cross? Like, maybe the width of the point of this pen, right? Maybe. You worked really hard. Okay. Now imagine hopping on your 12-speed starting in Dubai. Where's Dubai? Here we go. Starting in Dubai. And now imagine that you have to bike out of Dubai all the way down here, down the coast of Africa, down, across the Cape of Good Hope, back up the other coast of Africa, all the way across the Atlantic, through the Caribbean, before finally arriving at the deepwater oil port in Louisiana. That would take forever on a bike, right? Which, remember, is the speed that these oil tankers go. Like, that is how our oil travels, as if it were on a bike. And maybe you see where I'm going with this. This is a map of global oil flows put together by JP Morgan. Don't worry about all this text. We'll explain it in a minute. These red lines show the oil coming out of the Middle East, going out to the rest of the world. This is the stuff that's been cut off. Here it is back in December before the war. There it goes. The oil is flowing. But
this is so inefficient. We should consider launching our oil into space to make it faster. It's really funny. Except this is the most efficient mode of transport. Ironically enough, it sounds inefficient, but there's no other way to ship that quantity, which is why there are major problems here. Because, like, you got pipelines, but even then, you can't move as many units through a pipeline. You still need, and there are issues with pipelines as well. Pipelines don't travel all around the world. You can't do a pipeline from, you can't build a pipeline from the Persian Gulf to South Korea where the refineries are for the Asian markets, right? Like, it's just not going to happen.
remember, it moves at the speed of a bunch of bikes.
This video you're watching is by Max Fisher, part of Johnny Harris's network. Oh, that makes sense. There's a very Johnny Harris twang with this video, but it seems like a really good video so far.
So now it's January, and the oil is just finally reaching parts of Asia and Europe. And we're into February before it hits the US, and then it hits refineries in South Korea that then sends it on down these pink lines to Australia and New Zealand. So when the war starts and the oil stops flowing, there's actually still a ton out there, taking its long, lazy little bike ride around the globe. That's a big part of why things seem weirdly normal. For most countries, the oil shutdown has not reached us yet. We're still getting shipments that were sent out before the war started. So when do those shipments stop? If you look at that map again, it says most deliveries to the US will stop around April 15th. In Europe, they stop around April 10th. Asia, April 1st, so it's just getting started. But here in parts of Africa, it was March 20th. We're already well into it. And that's even hitting places like the US, where we are still receiving oil from before the war started. Countries whose shipments ran out are creating this big surge in demand. So anytime you go to the pump or pay your power bill, you are bidding against them and they are bidding against you. And all of this is going to get significantly worse when China and Europe start running out of shipments too and surge demand to replace it, which is really...
Vietnam and the Philippines are shutting down their economies one day a week. Rice prices have doubled. It's not feeling normal for them. There's a full video of it on YouTube. Sure, I don't think we're going to watch that right now because we got situation monitoring to do. China has a big stockpile. Yes, they did.
The Iran war was supposed...
They bought a ton before. I think they started buying a ton and increased their strategic reserves after the 12-day war started. Like after the 12-day war ended, rather. For a potential moment exactly like this one, right? There are obviously a lot of additional impacts of not being able to transit not just oil but gas as well. Precursor chemicals, fertilizer that then will impact field of medicine, agriculture, increase food prices. Total Energy CEO says, "We prefer paying fees to Iran rather than closing the Strait of Hormuz." There you have it. These are some of the first, but very important voices that are letting their position be publicly known. People siding with the IRGC, people siding with the Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz over whatever fucking inconsistent American enforcement that they want to add on unnecessarily on top of a strait that would be open as long as they just paid the toll to Iran. Good stuff,
Vessels are not at any Iranian ports or Iranian territorial waters.
Right now, no. And I keep telling you, uncertainty is reigning across the shipping industry.
Yeah.
That goes in peaks and troughs. If you'd asked me just before the weekend, I would have told you that there were at least half a dozen ship owners that were preparing their ships to move out. And we did see probably the busiest period of activity in terms of transits through the strait over the weekend. Around 30 ships transited. The shutters then came down. And as far as I can tell from most mainstream ship owners with their tankers still inside the Gulf, absolutely no appetite to move right now until they get some clarity. For those that were looking to get in, they are, again, waiting to see what happens over the next few hours. You've got a double blockade, essentially. Yeah. You've got the US essentially blockading Iranian-linked tankers, and then you've got, the existing restrictions and threats. And if you do engage with the Iranians, are the US going to get you, and vice versa? The shipping industry is stuck in the middle right now.
Yeah, I mean, I also, was looking at marine traffic data, and in total, since the war began, there are around 450 vessels that have been able to transit through the Strait of Hormuz, keeping in mind that it's usually 130 vessels per day. The big question now becomes, how many of these vessels...
Classic CNN still having these issues, by the way. It's so strange that the audio issues still persist on CNN's
paid
videos.
A toll to Iran, given that President Trump has said any vessel and any shipper that has paid will be indicted. What data do we have on who actually paid Iran directly?
Very little direct evidence, and that's deliberately so. I think everybody was very nervous about the tolls. Essentially, the money that was being paid was going directly to the IRGC, which is designated as a terrorist organization by certainly the US and the EU. No Western ship owner is going to want a paper record of that. And we know that settlement was being done in yuan or crypto. So I think probably there's a few nervous ship owners that we know to have paid. But I would stress that the vast majority probably haven't paid. I think, you're looking at a three-tier system. There's the Iranian ships themselves. Obviously, they're not charging their own ships to go through. There's the ones that got through with diplomatic agreements. So the Indian government has been absolutely clear that they definitely did not pay for any of their tankers to get out. And there are similar agreements with lots of other countries. There are a small amount that we know to have settled at least a fee. Now, in some cases, that was a large fee, around...
You ain't got so much aura as a currency, not gonna lie, code name, strong and shit. True.
$2 million for a couple of tankers that we know about. In some cases, this was being passed off as an administration cost, more in the tune of around $150,000 to $200,000. So I think probably there's going to be a few nervous questions as to how some of these ships got out, but that's for tomorrow. Right now, it's a question of what happens immediately and how we get the vessels moving.
Yeah, I mean, President Trump wants to see the strait opening up. Do you think that putting in a U.S. blockade is going to have that effect?
It's a little bit early to tell. I think, as I say, right now, nothing is moving. So I think
there was a piece in Foreign Policy from the Quincy Institute about how Iran or the U.S. could potentially strike a deal by agreeing to a toll system, but one that is done in dollars. It would strengthen the weakening petrodollar while also providing Iran with reparation revenue that Congress would never authorize. It would also be good for Iran's reserves. What do you think? Yeah, I think Iran would be fine getting paid in dollars, but the issue here is America weaponizing the dollar system against Iran and against its enemies, right? So there has to be some kind of guarantee, and I guess the guarantee in and of itself would be the fact that Iran controls the strait and could shut it off. That is guarantee enough, right? Iran enforcing its power, its control over the Strait of Hormuz would probably be a major guarantee that America can't fuck with it any longer and apply these sanctions back on Iran when it sees fit at the behest of Israel. Because once again, and I cannot stress this enough, and I will continuously repeat this over and over again, okay? The war that we have waged against Iran is not a war that we wage for our strategic interests. Iran as a country has, in spite of our actions, always been ready to negotiate, okay? They have openly stated it a million times over, and we have always said no. And then Barack Obama said yes for the first time ever. And there was a successful deal with Iran. Donald Trump destroyed the JCPOA at the behest of Israel. And ever since then, we have consistently agitated and worsened the Iranian economy by choice, by design, specifically so that we can destabilize this country with 93 million people. If you're an honest person, you have to look at it honestly, okay? All honest people will readily admit this reality. Iran was never a serious, significant threat to the United States of America. Iran, however, was a threat to Israel and still is a threat to Israel. Iran doesn't need to be a threat to Israel, of course. It's a sovereign nation in the region. It doesn't have to be a threat to Israel at all. But Iran will always remain a threat to Israel as long as it remains a sovereign nation with a ballistic missiles program that can reach Israel, as long as Israel continues its endeavors of destabilizing every other country in the region and expanding on the Greater Israel Project. That is the real problem. So the story here is very clear. If America wants to deal with Iran and negotiate with Iran and treat Iran like a sovereign state, which it should, it has to restrain Israel's ambitions. This is not just good for the region. This is not just good for Iran. You could even make the argument that it's good for Israel. It's certainly good for America. It's certainly good for the global energy markets. But right now, we are on this double suicide pact with the nation state of Israel, and we are abiding by their idiotic interests. Okay? These are not our interests at all. You cannot explain this from even a reactionary conservative perspective. What the Trump administration is doing right now cannot be explained from a pro-empire framework. Okay? This is against American imperialism. Obviously, I have a different calculation, a different moral calculation regardless. But even from the perspective of pro-American imperialism, this is directly at odds with our goals. Some instability and some volatility is good for people to make money, but the reality of the matter is too much volatility means our capital owners can't churn profits any longer. Okay? Peter Beinart explains this really well here. He says this war is all about the Palestinians. Dude, it's not even in Israel's strategic interests. I mean, yeah. I think it was True to Parsi that said it best on the broadcast. Israel sees every state as a threat to its security, regardless of the regime in charge. They are determined to reduce every country's capacity to make sure no one could ever challenge them should they choose to. Yes, it is a deeply paranoid, unbelievably fascistic state that is willing to act out its most violent desires, no matter who gets swept away in this cause, whether it be the global hegemon, United States of America, or whether it be all of the nations that are unfortunately placed so close next to Israel, right?
To that extent, it is having an impact, but we know that there's a couple of ships heading in westbound. We don't know whether they're going to try to get into Iranian ports. We've just seen that there's...
I think you may be wrong. This is about oil resources through fascism. No, the inception of this allegiance that we have with Israel and the allowance that the Israeli lobby has gotten, unlike any other country, the special privileges that Israel has gotten, unlike any other country, that has allowed it to create this sophisticated influence peddling operation is because of what you just said. Yes, resource extraction was the primary focus, was the primary reason for why we gave so many allowances to Israel, right? The unsinkable aircraft carrier in a resource-rich region that was a very reliable ally, okay, for many, many years. That's no longer the dynamic, especially with American energy independence. And also on top of that, like America becoming an exporter should have actually changed this calculation a little bit. But let's say we still want to have control over this region because we want to have control over the prices, right? Because who knows if Saudi Arabia and OPEC Plus decide to act out their own desires all of a sudden. They remind the world that they're autonomous group, right? then Israel comes into play. That's why it always has to be powerful. That's why we always have to give it unlimited support. However, regardless of America's exporter status, right, and regardless of this calculation, Gulf nations have been even more reliable allies of the United States of America for a very long time now. It's a very different design that we have. We've already successfully tamed any sort of ambition that the GCC might have had. Not only that, but also they give us trillions of dollars in investments. Israel does not. So in some respects, these vassalized states in the Gulf are more valuable to American strategic interests, and certainly more valuable as far as maintaining our global dominance through the petrodollar than fucking Israel ever could be. And yet, this has not changed our calculation even one bit. As a matter of fact, we've hardened our weird loyalty to Israel as time has moved on, and it especially accelerated under Trump 1, and now we're seeing its final stage in Trump 2.
One heading eastbound using what we call a zombie number. These are essentially tankers using identification of ships that have been scrapped years ago, trying to falsely, give themselves an identity. It'll be interesting to see whether the US Navy intercepts any of these. I think we're really now just waiting to see what the actual action is and the enforcement strategy from the US side.
All right, Richard Mead, really great to have you with us.
Richard Mead going meat for me.
Let's update you on what is happening right now in the Strait of Hormuz with the latest.
Yeah. If Iran drags the war out, the current war runs into a hard deadline. Under the War Powers Resolution, Trump can't legally continue a military operation in Iran past 60 days without Congress, but he may try to redefine the operation and reset the clock if push comes to shove. Under the War Powers Resolution Act of 1973, presidents must terminate military operations after 60 days unless Congress has voted to declare war or pass legislation to authorize use of force. Yeah, I don't think he's going to care about that. I don't think America or Donald Trump cares about that sort of thing.
Well, China president is meeting with the leaders of countries that have been impacted by the war and its economic fallout. Xi Jinping is meeting Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez to discuss political and economic ties between the two countries. Earlier, Xi has met with Abu Dhabi's Crown Prince Sheikh Khalid bin Zayed as China calls for stronger relations with the Arab world. And also in Beijing is Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov for talks on the US-Iran conflict and the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Beijing has affirmed its readiness to play a constructive role and contribute to peace in the Gulf region.
Historic changes are unfolding in ways never seen.
And now we lose Europe because we're Omega terrorists? I don't know, man. I think that should happen. And if Europe was smart and operating in a self-interested manner and at least had like a fraction of the confidence necessary to make these sorts of decisions, I'd be more open-minded to that. But they are so vassalized, dude. Pedro Sanchez is doing this. Maybe it opens up the conversations for other European countries, but I think there are significant hangups here. Part of it is racism. Part of it is Orientalism, the idea that you can never fucking trust the Chinese. Their system is too damaging, too scary for the rest of the world. Even when they've shown since basically 1979 that they have no ambitions of like militarily occupying other countries at all, and their ambitions are almost always internal, including the affairs in Taiwan, which they regard as, as a, internal issue, right? Some will say, oh, it's sovereignty and whatnot. I'm just telling you what the Chinese government's perspective on the matter is. But beyond that, at most, they build like, island bases and stuff like that in the South China Sea, things that, great powers obviously will always do. They don't have the fraction of the interest or the appetite that America has demonstrated over and over again to dominate the globe, right? So Tibet Cough, again, these are things that the Chinese government regards as internal, domestic affairs.
Before, human society faces a choice between peace and war, unity or confrontation. We must strengthen coordination, enhance cooperation, and build a more solid, resilient and dynamic China-Arab comprehensive strategic partnership.
China's Foreign Ministry spokesman, Guo Qiakan, is holding a daily media briefing in Beijing. He's been speaking about the situation in the Strait a few moments ago. We're going to take a listen.
With the temporary ceasefire agreement.
You say this as if China does not have border disputes with literally all of its neighbors, Hasanabi. Buddy, talk to me when China has 800 military bases. I'm saying, as far as great powers goes, the appetite that China has for military intervention is virtually non-existent in comparison to the United States of America. It's not even a fucking question. Like, you're literally... You're comparing not even apples to oranges. You're comparing a coughing baby to multiple nukes at that point. Like, they have a border dispute with India where they use sticks and literal stones, okay, in the enforcement of said border dispute. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing right now in Iran? What are we doing in Iran right now? We, as the United States of America, what are we doing in Iran? You have to dumb it down for some of these people. At least do it once a week. Law, I do, and every time I do, people like people go, "You're glazing China. You're glazing China. You're defending China." I'm not. I'm telling you as an American citizen, okay. I'm not only just as an American citizen, but I'm telling you as like someone who is looking at this situation honestly. I'm telling you the truth. What you have learned thus far is a lie. You're comparing America's unlimited appetite for death and destruction, whether it be Iran now or Iraq or Afghanistan or numerous other interventions that we've covertly engaged in or directly engaged in with boots on the ground military warfare, the countries that we have funded, the genocide that we funded, and the political cover we offered to Israel, which is an extension of America. And then you're comparing that to like the Chinese Coast Guard spraying Filipino fishermen with water cannons. It's ridiculous, right? It's a ridiculous asymmetry that you're trying to fucking compare. Yeah, Chinese foreign policy has its own problems, but using lethal military power to force the hand of other countries and subjugate them is not one of them. Exactly. That imbalance exists. That asymmetry always exists for like a decade. And then honest actors eventually will say, you know what, we were wrong about this. Whether it be ghost cities that people now recognize or are forced to recognize as like, incredibly productive tier 1 cities that are massive, or whether it be the Chinese debt trap, right? In comparison to IMF loans, in comparison to the way that the World Bank operates, Chinese loans had no fucking conditions whatsoever. And Chinese loans were oftentimes forgiven as well. This became a reality. After a decade of doing propaganda on the One Belt, One Road initiative, the Foreign Policy magazine had to openly write piece after piece, as they did for the past couple of years now, to say, hey, we have to really reconsider how we're giving loans and what kind of conditions we're offering that we're giving loans into the developing nations, because the Chinese loans are infinitely more favorable and they're out-competing us. Do you understand? First, Western analysts always look at whatever China is doing and greatly overemphasize it, embellish, sometimes lie, or refuse to understand why they're doing certain things, even though they're very forthcoming with why they're doing certain things. They always say it ahead of time. They call their shots out like Babe Ruth every single time. Or they do similar things that we do in terms of like offering loans and whatnot for development in exchange for natural resources. Okay, but their process is infinitely more favorable to the countries. So, of course, they prefer Chinese loans over Western loans. And then we complain about it at first. We're like, oh, they're doing what we were doing. How dare they do what we do? And then they turn out, and then it turns out that's not the same situation at all. So they have to like quietly admit, perhaps they're not doing what we've been doing. Perhaps we should change what we've been doing in an effort to compete against China. The immense irony of the U.S. now flat out refusing capitalism's basic rule of letting the best products win. I mean, that's always been the case. Trade protectionism has always been a fundamental aspect of American trade policy. Let's be real. All right, let's continue.
Reached by relevant parties still in place, the United States ramped up military deployment and resorted to a targeted blockade. This will only aggravate confrontation, escalate tension, undermine the already fragile ceasefire, and further jeopardize safe passage through the strait. It is a dangerous and irresponsible move. China believes that only a complete ceasefire can fundamentally create conditions for easing the situation. We urge relevant parties to honor the ceasefire arrangement, stick to the direction of peace talks, and take concrete actions to de-escalate the situation in the region so that normal traffic via the Strait of Hormuz will be able to resume as soon as possible.
Well, Katrina Yu is joining us now live from Beijing. So the Foreign Ministry spokesman, they're making it very clear where Beijing stands on this. They want everybody to honour the ceasefire agreement. They say that military intervention is only going to make things worse. President Xi and Pedro Sanchez, the Spanish leader, have been pledging closer ties amid what they're calling a crumbling international order. The UAE, it seems, is also of a similar mindset.
That's right. Very busy day for Chinese President Xi Jinping. In the morning, he met with UAE Crown Prince, who is joined by a rather large delegation of government and industry officials. They're here to strengthen, they say, the comprehensive strategic partnership between the UAE and China. So we're expecting some trade deals to come out of that, and behind closed doors, no doubt. They also discussed the war in Iran. After that, President Xi...
No, man, they're artificially devaluing their currency and not boosting domestic consumption in some hope that exports will produce growth and absorb the excess capacity that Chinese consumers are not. Trade requires two partners. If one is providing everything while needing nothing, that's just dependency. I don't understand why you don't see this. I mean, the answer to that is tough titties. Like, what are you talking about? You're mad that they get to outcompete us in the game that we designed. This is literally the peak of Western hypocrisy. It's no different than when Western nations would literally say, Chinese manufacturing is far too cheap, okay? It's too cheap. We can't compete. It'll destroy our domestic productive capacities. Why is it cheap? Well, because they control the flows of capital, okay? We have a similar system here in the United States of America and all across the Western world as well. It's called subsidies. The problem is those subsidies are not used or those subsidies come from a centralized control system, but the way that those subsidies are used is determined by private owners, okay? It's not determined by the state. In China, it's determined by the state. That argument isn't totally wrong, but that's just not exceptional for a powerful country. Exactly. But it's an argument that is identical, right? Like, that's why I always jokingly say, in order to defeat China, you have to become China, okay? Because their system is better. Their system is better than ours in terms of being a manufacturing hub. They have a far better system than we do. And we will never be able to compete with China because they have a 50-year runway that we do not as far as developing the productive forces. I am not mad at all. It's just the fact that if Europe, which will not go into a communist revolution anytime soon, they need to have an economy and manufacturing base. They are deliberately not boosting their living standards of their own population. We almost did China during FDR. I mean, we did because it was World War II. That's the only reason why we did a China. Everyone kind of did a China. Modern China during World War II. And we ate good off of that. Damn, you brighter than my future. Is it overexposed? No, I'm not overexposed. How will America become a production hub when half the American population has 6th grade reading capability? I mean, that kind of stuff doesn't matter as much. If there's a will, there's a way. The problem is there is no will, there is no interest, because that's just not how the American system works. The American system doesn't work that way. The American system works in the exact opposite way. It works at the behest of capital. That's it.
Hosted Pedro Sanchez from Spain. Now, this is the Spanish leader's 4th visit to China in just a few years. He's been criticized by some in Europe for treating China as a sort of strategic ally rather than an adversary. And he's really spoken about strengthening the ties between Beijing and Madrid for economic reasons. But he also says that the two countries have more in common, that they both respect international law and international order. He's actually calling on Xi Jinping to play a bigger role in the multipolar order and to do more when it comes to the war in Iran. He said at a press conference following his lunch with Xi Jinping that no interlocutor is like China and is like China able to play a key diplomatic role to end this conflict. They also spoke about countries, he mentioned countries that violate international law, that they are only just subjected to threats, i.e. Israel. So the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, they're very critical of Israel and the US, moving closer to Beijing. And Xi Jinping isn't done. This week, actually, he's also due to host the Vietnamese leader, To Lam, who's arriving in China this evening for a 4-day visit. So I think this really shows that during this war, China has not just been calling for restraint and calling for a return to talks. It's been really busy taking advantage of this moment to move closer to countries around the world who may be disenchanted with the US and its actions in Iran. And that's not to say that it's not doing anything when it comes to the war. We've just had China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi speak to the Pakistani Foreign Minister yesterday. He's hosting the Russian Foreign Minister today, Sergei Lavrov, and it's expected they will also discuss the Iranian conflict. And China also saying that it will do whatever it can to try to restore peace and stability in that region.
Katrina, we understand that there is a...
Can't believe you compare Sanchez to AOC Lamau. He's CHINAMAXXING while AOC's Netanyahu and JVP maxing. No. Also, it's different strokes for different folks. It's like ridiculous to make those comparisons. At the end of the day, the social base or the social appetite for social democracy in Europe is like far greater than the United States of America. That's number one. So that's not a great comparison regardless. Number two, you don't know what an AOC would look like if she was in power. And number three, with respect to the rest of the parliamentary system, Pedro Sanchez is a center-left figure that is trying to ensure that a far-left group doesn't actually win more favor. Those are the reasons why he's doing this stuff, which, you know, I don't have disagreements with. I mean, it's moving the needle in the right direction.
Chinese ship that's been sanctioned by the US passing through the Strait of Hormuz. Are you hearing anything in Beijing about that?
That's right. The Starry Rich, which is a mid-sized oil tanker, interestingly, it's a Malawi-flagged ship, although it is quite clearly owned by China, and it also broadcasts its own signals as being affiliated with China. We know that it left Dubai yesterday on Monday and actually stopped before the US trade blockade was announced, and it actually went to do a U-turn, and then it continued through the Strait of Hormuz, and we know it was the first vessel to pass through the strait since the blockade was imposed on Tuesday. Now, interestingly, as you mentioned, it was actually sanctioned in 2023 by the US for evading its sanctions on Iran. And so really its passage through the strait raises more questions than it provides answers. First of all, was it allowed by the US to pass through the strait because it was coming from Dubai and not from Iran? Or was its passage kind of missed by the US, maybe pointing to how difficult it is to enforce a blockade of that waterway? So I think we have to see how many more ships are able to pass and what their affiliations are.
Bringing us up to speed there from Beijing, that's Katrina Yu. Thank you very much indeed.
很高兴啊，同桑吉斯先生再次会面，这是你4年内第4次访华。
Bro, when they say this is your 4th visit to China, this is your 4th visit to China in 4 years, it almost seems like, bro, what are you doing? Like Xi Jinping is like, come on, dog. What's happening here? You like China a little too much, maybe. Cut it out, big dog. You've been here quite a lot.
访华，当今世界乱象丛生，国际秩序礼崩乐坏。
Every time I see this room, I just realize our tables aren't big enough. True.
国际法和国际秩序反映的这是一国的世界观、价值观、秩序观、责任观。中国和西班牙都是有原则、
Are you jealous? Yes, I am.
道义的国家，都愿意站在历史正确的一边。
I am jealous.
我们应该加强沟通。
Yeah, we should strengthen communication, deepen mutual trust. Always the same stuff. We must oppose a return of the world. We must oppose a return of the world to the law of the jungle. Uphold true multilateralism and safeguard global peace and development.
Presidente Xi, es un auténtico placer volver a verle. Que hoy volvemos a elevar al poner en marcha el diálogo estratégico entre nuestros dos países. Somos un pueblo amigable y constructivo.
What do you mean by that? Like, why would Xi be bothered that Pedro Sanchez visits China too much? It's a joke, man. I'm joking. Okay?
Con una larga historia, como también tiene China. Somos un país estable, predecible, y porque sabemos que solo ese espíritu nos conducirá a una prosperidad y a una paz duradera.
两岸同胞同属中华民族，中华民族是有。
This was Xi Jinping meeting with KMT leader Cheng Li-won in Beijing. This was quite the controversial move because, you know, it's not allowed. Any sort of conversation around like normalizing relations between mainland China and Taiwan obviously goes against our interests of using Taiwan as an entry point, as a constant thorn on the side of China. Now, Cheng Li-won is interesting because she initially was obviously a massive advocate for separation, massive advocate for independence, and her attitude has changed over the time. The reason why I say this, for the record, the reason why I say this is not because like I think there is a growth in the Taiwanese population to unify with mainland China any moment now. I'm not saying that at all. I'm simply saying that if there was ever an appetite for unity, reunification necessarily, in Taiwan, America would not allow it. I genuinely don't think America, as it stands currently, would ever allow that. And we're seeing a part of that equation right now. As soon as this conversation took place, and there's obviously supposed to be a meeting that Xi Jinping is going to take with Donald Trump that was supposed to happen this month. It was supposed to happen right now, actually. But now they pushed it back because of the Iran debacle. But in that conversation, they were going to talk about arms sales, right? Arms sales to Taiwan. America has consistently increased arms sales to Taiwan. China, understandably, is disturbed by this and considers this to be an act of aggression against the United States, against the People's Republic of China. The KMT isn't even really advocating unification for the moment. They just prefer closer economic and cultural ties with a more dovish defense policy. Exactly. Baby steps. Baby steps that I think are moving the conversation in the appropriate direction. China considers additional defense contracts from America to Taiwan as a provocation. It's understandable to see it as a provocation. They want peaceful reunification to take place. The Taiwanese population's attitude that is consistently polled year over year shows that they want status quo. Okay? It's the overwhelming majority opinion. They want status quo with China. 1 foot in the Western world and 1 foot in China, mainland China. And you'll hear, like, even in this conversation when he's talking directly with the KMT leader, he doesn't say we're going to reunify by force or by peace, no matter what, like the way that it's presented in the United States of America. He's basically just saying, like, we want to improve cooperation, relations across the strait. That is usually the language that is used. We want to decrease tensions and hostility across the strait. We want to improve relations across the strait. There have been plenty of opportunities for China to try and militarily overtake Taiwan. Today and tomorrow is a wonderful opportunity for China to do so, considering the American limitations, right? Like, look at the situation with America and American power projection capabilities, American force projection capabilities. America's so busy trying to dominate Iran and failing to do so for the last 46 days that how the fuck would they ever actually successfully defend Taiwan if a military takeover ever took place? They can't. So that should potentially help you understand or clue you in on what the ambitions actually look like, right?
有着5000多年文明史的伟大民族。包括台湾同胞在内的各族人民啊，共同开拓了祖国的辽阔疆域，共同缔造了统一的多民族国家，共同书写了辉煌的中国历史，共同创造了灿烂的中华文明，共同培育了伟大的民族精神，也铸就了国土不可分。 国家不可乱，民族不可散，文明不可断的共同信念，引领中华民族啊自强不息，中华文明啊绵延不断，
在习总书记的领导之下，
What is this rom-com music? I don't know.
而且持续腾飞。15的规划刚刚开局，必将再上新的台阶，值得期待。
The meeting marked the first formal high-level engagement between the leaders of the two parties in a decade. Xi said the meeting holds significant importance for advancing relations between the two parties and for promoting ties across the Taiwan Strait.
当前世界百年变局加速演进。
No matter how the international landscape and the situation across the Taiwan Strait may evolve, the overarching trend toward the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation will not change, and the prevailing momentum for the Chinese on both sides of the strait to come together will not change.
不会改变。
Chen echoed what Xi said. She believes both parties should uphold the common political foundation of adhering to the 1992 consensus that embodies the One China principle, as well as the post-Taiwan independence. Chen later held a press conference where she spoke about the meeting and called on all parties in Taiwan to set aside their differences and work together to promote peace amid rising tensions across the Taiwan Strait and increasing confrontation in cross-strait relations.
Yeah, what she wants out of this bargain is better relations with mainland China. What she's willing to offer for it is limiting arms sales from the United States of America, and in exchange for that, what they receive is Taiwanese cultural products to enter the Chinese market, TV shows, things of that nature, you know, a boost to the Taiwanese economy, stuff like that. Okay?
General Secretary Xi Jinping has shown a significant gesture of goodwill. Such exchanges will definitely go beyond the scope of just between the Communist Party of China and the Kuomintang.
From 7th to 12th April.
Anyway, no matter what your attitude is overall, like, this is a step in the right direction, regardless. Developing better ties with mainland China, this fucking behemoth, is still not a bad thing, okay? It's not.
The delegation led by Chang Li-wen visited Jiangsu province, Shanghai, and Beijing in a tight and busy schedule. Despite this, the visit certainly brought about successful results. On Wednesday morning, Chang Li-wen and her delegation of Chinese Kuomintang Party have come to visit the mausoleum of Dr. Sun Yat-sen, a great pioneer of China's democratic revolution. 21 years ago, she stood in the same spot as a spokesperson for the Kuomintang delegation, accompanying then-Chairman Lian Chan on his historic ice-breaking visit. Visitors from across the country greeted them. The moment left a strong impression, underscoring how deep-rooted and enduring the bonds across the strait remain. In Shanghai, the focus shifted to economic vitality, with more than 20,000 Taiwan businesses currently operating in the city. Through first-hand experiences ranging from drone delivery services to the tour of C919 assembly line and a visit to Yangshan Deepwater Port, the world's largest automated container terminal, Chen highlighted the vision of development that is already taking shape. In Beijing, Chang Li-wen made a point of visiting Tsinghua University High School and Zhongguancun, often referred to as China's Silicon Valley, focusing on AI education and the broader innovation ecosystem. She emphasized the engagement with the mainland goes beyond managing tensions. It also provides access to technological opportunities that will help shape the next generation's future prosperity.
I usually say that both sides of the Taiwan Strait have strength of their own, and now they should join hands to solve problems together, and even beyond that, for the world.
As the delegation was wrapping up their visit on April 12th, the Taiwan Work Office of the Communist Party of China Central Committee unveiled a package consisting of 10 policies and measures that aim to boost exchanges and cooperation across the Taiwan Strait. This includes the establishment of the regular communication mechanism between both parties, promoting two-way exchanges between young people on both sides, fast-tracking the full resumption of regular direct flights across the strait. The Chinese Kuomintang welcomes the policies and measures.
The Chinese Kuomintang Party welcomes this and hopes that all parties in Taiwan will jointly promote it without being hindered by any obstacles so as to benefit the people of Taiwan.
Although the ruling Democratic Progressive Party authorities in Taiwan made a statement criticizing Kuomintang and Chang Li-wen for visiting the mainland, others said the visit holds great significance for the promotion of peace and common development across the strait.
I think the meeting between both parties was very successful. It lays a good foundation for peace. And I particularly thank our compatriots on the Chinese mainland for supporting all of this.
We expect to use the opportunity of this meeting to work together for peace and to liberate our sources from bottomless weapon purchase and to return to the construction for people's livelihoods.
The road ahead may not be smooth, but after years of rising tensions, Chang's visit serves as a reminder that dialogue remains essential. It not only reinforces the political foundation for more stable cross-strait relations, but also offers a framework for broader engagement between the Chinese mainland and a wide range of political parties, groups, and social sectors in China's Taiwan region, helping steer the exchanges back toward a more constructive path.
CPC and KMT leaders have met over 20 times the past 2 decades. Figures like Lian Chan, Wu Po Sung, Ma Ying-jeou, Eric Chu, and Hung Husiu Chu have all met either China's President Hu or President Xi, yet none of these meetings sparked anything close to the global reaction we're seeing this time. What has really changed is the atmosphere. In the past, people understood that the conditions for reunification simply weren't ripe. Those high-level meetings, while symbolically important, can't fundamentally alter the status quo. But now, with China's steady rise, a growing number of observers have come to believe or feel that the conditions for reunification are gradually falling into place. China's adversaries also feel the shift viscerally, and their anxiety is palpable. Their fierce opposition to this latest meeting only draws more global attention to it. Chang Li-wen is not necessarily more pro-China or more capable than her predecessors. But as an old Chinese saying goes, a man of the hour is made by the times, not necessarily himself. So that is that's the situation. And I suspect that is the reason why, Americans and Western analysts are more mad than ever before.